It began with a whisper. Not from a person, nor the wind, but the fog itself, curling around the old stone path behind the cottage I'd rented at the edge of Larkspur Wood. I'd come to this village hoping for stillness after the funeral, a month spent alone where no one knew my name. The kind of place where people speak softly and leave you to your ghosts. That evening, the mist rolled in faster than usual. It hung low, pearlescent, and strangely warm against my skin. I'd taken to walking at dusk, mostly to escape the staleness of the air indoors. But that night, the forest felt different. Heavier. The birds were quiet, and the trees stood like watchers, each one listening to my footsteps. And then I saw it. Between two ancient oaks, where I swear there had only been thorns and brambles before, stood a stone archway, moss-laced and cracked, with a rusted iron gate swung open like a mouth mid-sentence. I shouldn't have gone in. But grief makes you curious about endings. And the air that passed through that gate smelled of old incense and lilies. Church smells. Funeral smells. Familiar in the most unwelcome way. Beyond it lay a clearing I had never seen on any map or walk. And in its center, half sunken into the earth, was a chapel, no more than 20 feet wide, its roof caved in, its bell tower reduced to a spine of blackened beams. Ivy had claimed it, draped like mourning cloth. And yet, candlelight flickered inside. That was the first time I saw her. She stood just beyond the broken arch of the chapel door, motionless. A pale figure, draped in blue-gray linen, her hands clasped as though in prayer. Her face was partly shadowed, but I could see her mouth, a small, somber curve. Not smiling. Not frowning. Remembering. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I stepped forward, and she stepped back, slow, like a deer deciding whether I was a threat. My heart was hammering now, but not from fear. From recognition. I'd never seen her before in my life, and yet I knew her. She tilted her head, and for a moment, I thought she was going to say something. But then a gust of wind swept through the chapel ruins, scattering ash and petals across the floor. And when I looked up again, she was gone. The candles too. Snuffed as if they had never been. I stood there alone, my breath forming clouds in the stillness. Then I heard the bell. Just once. Faint. Hollow. Coming from beneath the earth. And that was when I realized, there was no bell in the tower above. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I returned to the cottage, wet with dew and shivering from more than just cold, my mind would not rest. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw her again, standing in the threshold of the ruined chapel, head tilted, eyes hidden but watching me all the same. It was like her image had burned into my vision, a lingering shape behind the eyelids. By morning, the fog had not lifted. It should have. The locals often joked that Larkspur Wood was wreathed in dreams till breakfast, but this was different. The mist clung thick and low, like it had grown denser overnight. I opened the window, expecting the sharp scent of pine and damp leaves, but the air was strangely sweet, thick with a perfume I couldn't place. Floral, yes, but with something bitter underneath, like crushed myrrh and burnt lavender. I didn't eat. I didn't dress. I just walked. Something in me needed to return. The path behind the cottage seemed longer this time. Or perhaps the fog made it feel that way, disorienting me, bending the world at the edges. Still, I found the gate again, though I never remembered seeing it the first time. It was shut now. The rusted iron groaned as I pushed it open, the sound echoing far too wide for a place so small. The chapel looked the same, ancient and slouched, its bones wrapped in ivy and shadow. But the door was open now, wider than before, the inside darker, deeper. I stepped through. And the air changed. It was colder inside, but not the kind of cold that bites skin, this was a weight, pressing down on the chest. Dust hung in the beams of faint light, and the pews were warped, misshapen, like they'd been chewed on by time itself. At the front, where the altar should have been, there was only a sunken circle of stone, ringed with melted wax and dried herbs. The wood beneath it had blackened, scorched as if by fire, but the edges were too neat, too deliberate. It wasn't a chapel anymore. It was something older. Something repurposed. That's when I heard the whisper again. Not words. Just breath. A presence behind me, unseen but unmistakable. And when I turned, she was there, closer this time. Inside the chapel. Standing between the pews, her hands still folded. She looked sad. Not frightened. Resigned. I opened my mouth. I said her name. I don't know how I knew it. Amaris. She blinked. And I saw a tear slip down her cheek. I reached out a hand, foolishly, instinctively, and the moment I did, the room changed. The light dimmed. The floor groaned like something old waking from slumber. And the whisper became a voice. Dozens of them. Low, murmuring. Chanting beneath the floor. The scent of incense turned to ash. And she whispered, finally, you shouldn't be here. Then she was gone. Vanished like smoke. I staggered out of the chapel, half running, half dreaming. The fog swallowed the trees, and the gate was gone. But I could still hear the bell. 3 soft tolls. This time, closer. I spent the rest of the day convincing myself I had imagined it. The girl, the voices, the bell. All of it. That's what the mind does when it's frightened. It tries to tuck away the impossible into little boxes labeled grief, or fatigue, or fancy. But even as I lit the fire that evening and sipped weak tea with trembling hands, I could still smell her. Lilies. Candle wax. And something underneath it all, something old, like forgotten parchment and damp stone. The fog pressed against the window like a curious child. It hadn't lifted all day. When night fell, it thickened further, turning the outside world into a pale soup of shifting shapes. The woods were gone, swallowed whole, but somehow, the chapel pulled at me again. I tried to resist. Truly, I did. But something gnawed at the edges of my thoughts, like a memory not quite mine begging to be remembered. I lit a lantern and left the cottage. The flame flickered wildly the moment I stepped outside, as if something unseen had exhaled. The path was shorter this time. Or I simply no longer walked it, I was drawn. The gate stood open again. And now I could see it more clearly, symbols carved into the iron, half-worn and unfamiliar. A language I did not know, but felt rather than read. They were names, I think. Or warnings. The chapel itself seemed taller, though I know that sounds strange. The broken bell tower had not grown, yet it loomed larger in the mist, casting a shadow that didn't match its shape. I stepped inside. The pews had changed. Where there were once 5, there were now 7. Arranged in a crescent. And each one bore a single item upon it, a feather, a ring of braided hair, a cracked mirror, and so on. Offerings, perhaps. Or relics. At the altar, the circle of scorched stone still pulsed faintly. Like an ember refusing to die. And then I saw her again. This time she stood at the very back of the chapel, facing the wall, her veil trailing along the cold floor. Slowly, she turned to me. Her eyes were pale and unfocused, like a candle behind glass. "You remember me now, don't you?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. My mouth was dry. But something inside me did remember. Not clearly, not fully, but as if I'd once dreamed her name and woke before I could speak it aloud. She stepped toward me, her movement strange, graceful, yes, but heavy, like each step pulled at something unseen. "They came here once, for love," she said, not quite looking at me. "And they left with nothing." I asked her who. She tilted her head. "You did." Before I could speak again, the lantern in my hand flared, bright and angry, and then snuffed out. Total darkness. And in that dark, I felt them. Hands. Cold, dry fingers brushing my arms, my back, my neck. Dozens. I stumbled back, heart thundering. But no one was there. Only her. And she was weeping now. Silently, without breath or sound. The tears shimmered like rain on glass. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. The bell tolled again. 4 times. Each one deeper than the last. And the chapel floor moved. Shifted beneath my feet, like it was breathing. I ran. Out into the fog. Back through the woods. But the mist followed me home. And when I looked back, I swear, the chapel wasn't there anymore. Only the bell's echo, fading like a heartbeat into the trees. I awoke with mud on my boots. That's the first thing I noticed, the thick, black grit crusted along the floorboards beside my bed. I hadn't remembered coming home. Or undressing. My lantern, cold and cracked, lay beside the hearth, though I distinctly recalled dropping it in the chapel. And the fog, it had followed me. It pressed against every window of the cottage, thick as wool. Not just outside now, but inside, too, coiling in the corners, seeping through the floorboards, gathering in the spaces between breath. The fire wouldn't stay lit. The matches wouldn't catch. I sat in the gloom with only a small candle for company, watching the shadows grow teeth. The air was wrong. Bent. It felt like being underwater. Every sound muffled. Every movement heavy. And I was not alone. Not entirely. I first heard the whisper around midday. A soft hum, coming from beneath the floorboards, not like wind or creaking wood, but a voice. A woman's voice, humming a lullaby I almost knew. Not quite familiar, not quite foreign. It made my chest ache. I pressed my ear to the floor and heard more. Breathing. Shallow, slow. As though someone was lying directly beneath me, face up, whispering through the cracks. When I spoke, "Who's there?" the breath stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't try. I sat beside the window, candle flickering, eyes locked on the woods. And then I saw her again. Amaris. Standing at the edge of the trees, veil drifting like mist, her feet bare, her hands outstretched as if waiting for me. I opened the door. I don't know why. Some part of me believed I could reach her this time, speak the words I never had, words I didn't know I'd been carrying all this time. But when I stepped outside, she was gone. In her place, hanging from the trees, were dozens of little objects, braids of hair, wax-sealed letters, dried flowers, rings strung on red thread. Offerings. I moved closer, drawn without understanding why, and saw something hanging at eye level. A photograph. Weathered. Water-damaged. It was me. Younger, perhaps. My face thinner, eyes wider. But it was me. Standing in front of the chapel. Smiling. And in the background, barely visible, was her, Amaris, watching from the shadows. I stumbled back, breath catching in my throat. The air rippled, and the fog grew denser, colder. I turned to run, but the forest twisted. The trees leaned in. The path vanished. And then, ahead, there it was again. The chapel. Still ruined. Still waiting. But this time, I could see lanterns burning along the windows. And shapes, people, moving inside. Silhouettes bowing their heads in prayer. All of them silent. Still. I should have run. Screamed. Wept. But I stepped forward instead. The fourth bell tolled as I crossed the threshold. And something unseen closed the door behind me. The door shut with a finality I felt in my bones. Not slammed, no, sealed. Like it had never been a door at all, but a mouth that had closed gently around me. The air inside was thick with incense and rot. Not the scent of death exactly, but something older, damp stone, wet ashes, wax melted too many times. I could see the flicker of lanterns along the inner walls, yet none had visible flames. They pulsed faintly, like beating hearts behind frosted glass. And then there were the people. Dozens of them. Seated in the pews, unmoving, heads bowed, hands clasped. No breath. No rustle of cloth or whisper of movement. They looked like mourners, but wrong. Each one wore veils. Long, white, dust-streaked veils that covered their faces entirely. Not one of them acknowledged me. I stepped forward, my heart beat suddenly far too loud in that silence. The circle of stone at the front, the altar, was alight now. Not with flame, but with a dim, greenish glow that pulsed in rhythm with the lanterns. Around it, the items I'd seen before, the ring, the braid of hair, the cracked mirror. But now they were laid out in perfect symmetry, as if arranged for ritual. Or judgment. And there, at the center, stood her. Amaris. No longer veiled. She turned to face me, and for the first time, I truly saw her. Her face was pale, but not deathly, beautiful in that aching, impossible way, like seeing a song you half remembered. Her eyes were silver, not from light, but from within. They did not reflect, they glowed. "You came," she whispered. Her voice echoed not through the air, but directly into my mind. "I didn't know where else to go," I said, my voice sounding small, foreign. She took a step closer, and the air grew heavier. "You never left," she replied. My breath caught. "I don't understand." She smiled, so softly it hurt. "You came here before, long ago. You gave yourself to the chapel. To me." I shook my head. "No, I've never." "You asked to be remembered." The fog outside pressed tighter against the stained glass. It seemed to be breathing now, sighing against the walls. "You said you'd love me beyond the veil," she said, voice thickening with sorrow. "Even if I could never be yours. Even if I belonged to the chapel. Even if it meant forgetting." A memory bloomed. Sudden. Unwanted. My hands clasped with hers, long ago, as we stood before a circle of flame. My voice sang her name through tears. A promise. And then. Nothing. Emptiness. Waking in another life. "You asked the chapel to take the pain," she said, tears gathering at the corners of her silver eyes. "And it did. But it kept your memory as payment." The pews behind me creaked. Slowly, the veiled mourners began to turn their heads. All at once. All at me. And beneath their veils, I saw my own face. Every one of them. Dozens of me, staring back in silence. "You are the offering," Amaris whispered. "And they are all the versions of you who came before. Who loved me, and left. Who forgot." The fifth bell tolled. And the walls began to bleed light. The walls bled light, not red, not white, but memory. It poured like mist from the stones, drifting down in ribbons of images. Not visions, no, lives. I saw them flash by in moments. A child's drawing folded into a locket. A snow-covered garden with two figures dancing barefoot. A candlelit room where my hand trembled as it reached for hers but never touched. Every memory, mine. But not from this life. Each ribbon trailed from the chapel walls, weaving through the air like smoke, and vanished into the veiled mourners' chests. Into me, over and over, across time. All of them, all these selves who had come before, who had fallen into the same longing. The same loss. I staggered back, choking on something that wasn't smoke. Regret. Amaris stood still in the glow of the altar, watching me with a sorrow deeper than the grave. Her gown was darker now, blue as a bruise, and her eyes shimmered with too many lifetimes. "I loved you in all of them," she said, "and you left me in every one." "I didn't know," I said. "I never remembered." "You asked to forget." Her voice didn't rise, but it struck like thunder. "You begged the chapel to take the pain, to take me." The fog inside the chapel grew heavy, curling upward like fingers reaching from the floor. The veiled figures began to rise, slow and soundless. And as they did, their veils fell away. Some looked like me. Others, not quite. Slight differences. Scars I didn't have. Eyes just a shade off. One had burns along the jaw. Another wept blood that never reached his chin. All of them me, and yet not me. "I don't understand," I whispered. "What is this place?" "The chapel remembers," Amaris said, stepping closer, her bare feet silent on the stone. "It holds the echoes of those who ask it to take their sorrow. It offers peace, yes. But peace is not the same as freedom." My knees buckled. The memories, mine and theirs, were beginning to bleed into each other. Names, gestures, scents, promises made and broken in 100 dusks. I remembered now, some of it. A forest cloaked in silver leaves. A night of candlelight and whispered Latin. Her hand in mine as I pressed a blade to my own palm, letting the blood fall in a circle. Saying the words, "Let me forget her, if I cannot have her." And the chapel had answered. It took the memory. It kept her. And every time, I returned. In a new shape, a new age. drawn like a moth to the heat of a flame I could no longer name. Until now. She never forgets, said one of the others, one of the MES, his face pale and cracked like dry clay. Amaris turned away then, walking slowly back toward the altar. Her veil lifted into her hands again. She waits, he said again. Even when we don't. The sixth bell tolled. And all the lanterns flickered out. Darkness fell. But I was not blind. Because now, I could see through their eyes. All of them. And they were watching me. The darkness wasn't empty. It pulsed. It watched. I could feel their eyes, my eyes, all on me. 100 selves, 100 fractured echoes. Each of them bearing the shape of me, but warped by what they had done. What I had done. Each time I came here. Each time I asked the chapel to take it all away. And now I saw them for what they were. Not mourners. Not shades. Offerings. I turned back toward Amaris. She had stepped behind the altar now, her veil drawn low once more. A faint glow traced the edge of the scorched circle beneath her feet. It pulsed with a heartbeat not hers, not mine, the chapel's. I can still leave, I said, the words trembling on my tongue. Can't I? A silence followed. Long, heavy. Then she spoke, her voice muffled beneath the veil. Yes. But only the part of you that has not loved me. I felt something stir within my chest. A slow, unraveling. Like threads being tugged loose from a tapestry. I fell to one knee, breath ragged. My thoughts were no longer just mine, they spilled in from all directions. The memories of the others bled into me, moments of bliss before the end, their hands trembling as they begged the chapel for release, the look in Amaris's eyes as she was forgotten again and again. Each of them had left her behind. And I had promised not to. I will remember. Even if it kills me. I remembered saying it. Once. Long ago. Before the chapel sealed the memory away in stone and smoke. One of the echoes stepped forward from the pews. A version of me, younger, eyes hollow, mouth trembling. You can go, he whispered. But you'll just return. You always do. The pain will bring you back. And each time, less of you remains. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. Then what am I supposed to do? Another voice answered from the shadows, another self, his voice distant, broken. Finish it. The altar began to shift. The circle of scorched stone split, revealing a narrow stair spiraling into the earth. The glow below was not firelight. It was memory light. Shimmering like tears. And at its mouth, Amaris stood once more. Her veil was gone. Her face pale and radiant with sorrow. You can come down, she said, voice like wind through leaves. And stay. This time. All of you. I looked back toward the chapel doors. They were gone. Just wall now. I was inside, entirely. The seventh bell tolled. Not outside this time. From within me. And my feet began to move. The steps groaned beneath my weight. They weren't made of stone, as I'd first thought, but of bone. Long, flat, fused together by some dark resin. Each step whispered when touched, sighing syllables in a language I did not know, but somehow recognized. Words buried in the marrow of the soul. Amaris descended ahead of me, barefoot, her gown trailing the stair behind her like spilled milk in moonlight. The glow grew brighter the deeper we went. Not warm, not cold, just real. Real in the way dreams aren't. As I passed the seventh step, I could no longer hear my heartbeat. Only the sound of names being spoken. Mine, over and over, in hundreds of voices. Soft, pleading, angry, broken. They echoed through the walls, spoken by the versions of me who had come before. Some begged to be remembered. Others cursed the chapel, cursed her. One simply wept, whispering, "Forgive me," again and again. I wanted to cover my ears, but the sound was inside me now. Amaris reached the bottom. She turned to face me in a round chamber hollowed from the stone, lit by 7 lanterns hanging in a perfect circle. In the center stood a basin, wide, shallow, filled not with water, but with memory. It shimmered like liquid silver, like glass caught mid-melt. Images danced across its surface, kisses never shared, letters never sent, promises broken before they left the lips. My face. Her face. Over and over, in lives I could not name. This is all that remains, she said. What the chapel kept. What you left behind. My throat closed. The air smelled like dusted roses and rain-soaked ash. I want to remember, I said. Her eyes searched mine, silver and infinite. Then you must give up forgetting, she said. She raised her hand and reached into the basin. The silver clung to her skin, coiling up her wrist like vines. When she pulled her hand free, she held a shape, flickering, fragile, a flame the color of grief. My love. Not as I felt it now, confused and fogged, but pure. Sharp. Raw. The way it had been before I asked the chapel to take it away. She offered it to me. If you take it back, she said softly, you will remember everything. Every lifetime. Every leaving. Every return. And if I don't? I asked. You'll walk out of here lighter. Hollow. You'll forget me again. Until the next time. I stared at the flame in her hand. It flickered in rhythm with the lanterns above. I remembered something then. A moment from a life that might have been mine. Me, kneeling before her in the woods, holding out a bundle of wildflowers. Her laughter. The way she said my name like it was a blessing. The way I looked at her, like I believed love could conquer time. And then I saw myself walking away. Tears in my eyes. The chapel rising in the fog. The 8th bell did not toll. It whispered. Choose. I reached for the flame. Not because I was brave. Not because I understood. But because I was tired of forgetting. Tired of waking each life with that ache in my chest, that hole shaped like someone I could never name. The moment my fingers brushed it, the silver flame leapt into my palm. It did not burn. Not in the way fire burns. No, it remembered me. It flooded through my veins, pouring into the hollows where the chapel had once scraped memories clean. And with it came a pain so vast, so sharp, I cried out. I saw everything. 100 lifetimes. 100 me's. 100 partings. I saw myself as a scholar, kneeling in a candlelit library, whispering her name over ancient ink. I saw myself as a soldier, pressing a charm into her hand before marching into fog. I saw myself as a child, watching her vanish into the woods, the chapel blooming behind her like a mouth made of stone and light. And every time, I had loved her. And every time, I had left her. Not out of cruelty. Out of fear. The chapel had offered me peace. Escape. The forgetting of something too deep to bear. And I had accepted it. Again and again. Amaris stood before me, her eyes wet but calm. You remember now, she said. I nodded, though tears blurred everything. I remember everything. She reached toward my face, brushed a thumb along my cheek. The gesture so gentle, it undid me. You asked for freedom, she whispered. But freedom was never what you needed. What, then? She smiled, not sad, not bitter. Tired. To stay. The lanterns above us began to flicker wildly, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls. The basin of memory shuddered, then dissolved into mist, rising like breath from a grave. Behind me, I could hear the others, my echoes, moving again. But not toward me. Away. Dissolving. Unraveling. Because I was no longer their future. I was me again. Whole. Bound to the choice I'd made. The chapel trembled. Dust fell like snow from the ceiling. Above us, somewhere far away, I heard it. The 9th bell. But this time, it didn't toll for loss. It tolled for presence. I looked at her. Do we stay together? I asked. This time. Her hand slid into mine. Warm. Real. This time, she said, you remember. And the chapel began to collapse. Not in ruin. In release. Stone shedding stone. Light pouring in from cracks in the walls. The earth groaned, not in pain, but in relief, as if the memory it had held for so long had finally been returned. We stood at the center as the mist peeled away. As the sky opened above us, full of stars. And still, the chapel held its breath, for one more moment. Waiting. For the final hour. The stars above us shimmered like eyes long shut. The chapel was dissolving, not crumbling, shedding. Layer by layer, it peeled away everything it had hoarded across lifetimes, echoes, regrets, forgotten names. The stone cracked not in violence, but in forgiveness. The flame inside me still burned, but it no longer ached. It warmed. It held. Amaris stepped closer to me as the final wall gave way, her hand still in mine. Her skin was pale as frost, but her touch had weight. Real weight. No longer a ghost in the fog. I looked around and saw the others, my echoes, standing at the edge of the circle. Fewer now. Fading. They watched in silence, their eyes hollow but no longer pleading. One by one, they nodded to me. And then they were gone. Dissolved like morning frost on old glass. She turned her face to mine. You chose the hardest thing, she said. To remember. I asked. She shook her head. To stay. The ground beneath us rumbled gently, and from the earth where the altar once stood, something began to rise. Not stone. Not bone. A seed. Small. Pale. Beating with light. She knelt beside it and touched her palm to the soil. This is where the forgetting lived. Where love was buried to keep it from hurting. She looked up at me. But now, something else can grow. I understood then. The chapel had never been a place of worship. Not truly. It had been a tomb. A vault of pain sealed shut by a single, impossible wish, make it go away. And now, it had been opened. Set free. As the last of the mist unraveled into starlight, I looked out beyond the woods. There was no path back to the cottage. No path at all. Only a field of soft light and the sound of wind through leaves. She rose, her hand still in mine. What happens now? I asked. She smiled. Now, you live. Fully. With everything you carry. We stepped together beyond the last stones of the chapel. No gate. No veil. Only the hush of dawn rising through the trees. The 10th bell never tolled. It sang. A single, soft note. Like a promise finally remembered.